These right here are some of my favorite wood blanks that Dollar Tree has right now. For this project, we're gonna need 2 of them and we're gonna turn them into a pumpkin. I'm gonna use a little bit of wood glue and some hot glue to attach these two by just smushing them together. Once they were dry, I grabbed some of my Waverly chalk paint in the orange, and I gave this a nice rustic coat using a baby wipe. You could absolutely use a paintbrush and paint this on. This is just what I chose to do. It allows that wood grain to kind of pop through, and as you can see here, I'm able to paint this pretty quickly with just a baby wipe. When I was happy with that coverage, I then grabbed a little bit of white paint on a paintbrush and went all around the edges where some of that wood was showing. This is going to allow me to kind of blend some of Antique's Waverly wax around the edges and get a very mute brown color while it's still having that rustic edge feel. I did not have any molds I liked in particular. I would have absolutely put a nice clay mold around the edge of this beautiful pumpkin, but I decided it was fine just the way that it was. You can see here how there's some of that white and some of the dark kind of popping through around the edge. You can do this as much as you would like to create it as dark as you would like, or keep it as light as you would like. For the stem, I kind of just went fishing in my little wood bits that I had here. I wasn't really sure what I was going for. You could absolutely use whatever stem you would like. I decided to go with this little one right here that had a hole in it, and you don't see me on camera do it, but I took a half of wooden bead and put right over the top of that hole so you couldn't see it. I decided I wanted to put a little accent on our pumpkin, so I grabbed a damask stencil and taped it down as best as I could in the spot that I wanted, and then grabbed my homemade texture paste to put a little raised stencil right on this section. You could use paint if you want. It does not have to be texture paste. It's completely up to you. I put a small thin layer here, and if you want, you could absolutely put another one on the back. I love how simple this turned out. I added just a little bit of accents around our stem here, and I left the back completely blank. This way, if we wanted to switch it out and we didn't want to have that fancy schmancy side going on there, we could most certainly turn it around and be extremely rustic and still love our little DIY pumpkin. Stencil decor piece, grab one of Dollar Tree's chargers. Pick a stencil, paint color. People, look how cute this little baby makeup sponge is. I'm about to go buy all the baby makeup sponges when I find out wherever they came from, because those were given to me. Taping this down with some painter's tape was a little difficult because there were some spots that were raised around the edges. So in an attempt to combat that, you'll notice as I take our little baby sponge with a smoosh of black paint on here, that I'm taking my hand and pressing it in different sections on the stencil as I go. This is just trying to press those gaps completely into our charger so we can minimize the paint smooshing underneath that stencil and causing a mess. Once this is all dry, if you want to put a layer of sealer over it, go right ahead. I absolutely love how creative and gorgeous this turned out, and it was super easy to do. McKenzie Childs is a style I am asked to dupe often and I dupe a lot of things. This is actually going to be my first time trying to recreate this style, and we're going to do it on some wood pumpkins. I purchased these cool pieces from the Restore for only 50 cents. You could cut up some scrap wood pieces as well for these ideas. Dollar Tree also has little round pieces that you can pick up. Walmart has these amazing live edge pieces you can grab. And another cool idea would be to take these little shadow boxes from Dollar Tree and turn them into pumpkins too. We are going to be doing several different things to these pumpkins, so we're going to need to start off by creating a nice base. So I'm just taking some of my DIY paint in the beadboard color and going over all of these 2 times. For the stems, I'm going to use these old knobs I thrifted. I do want the knobs gold, so I'm going to use some of Dixie Belle's gold gilding wax to obtain that color. If you don't have this stuff, Rub and Buff is a good alternative. It will also change colors to metals. I did not have any buffalo check or checkered napkins or decoupage paper in my stash anywhere, and I don't have the patience that some crafters do to paint my own design like that, but I did have this TDS decoupage paper design in my stash, and I figured this would do the trick. So I cut 2 different sections to apply one whole piece of the TDS decoupage paper onto the large pumpkin and then a smaller section, and just did half of the small pumpkin, and I made the paper go the opposite way. On the other pumpkin, because we got 3 of those joints, I just took some purple paint and some painter's tape and created some background lines. For the first stencil on the first pumpkin, we're going to use this paint color to take a damask stencil and just do a portion of the pumpkin that we put the purple lines on. For the tall pumpkin that we applied the TDS decoupage paper to the entire piece, we're just taking 1 leaf stencil and we're putting 3 different designs at the top. Right here, I am marking the stencil in place because before I actually put the stencil down, I'm going to take some gold gilding wax, and you could absolutely use some metallic gold paint for this, and tracing around where I made those marks. So when we lay that color down in the stencil, we'll have some gold popping out around it. On our third pumpkin that we applied half the TDS decoupage paper to, we're going to take a damask stencil and apply half of the design in pink for a little pop. We're going to use some super glue, Gorilla Glue Gel. I love this stuff. It's my favorite, to attach our knobs. And then once these are dry, I put them off to dry for a couple hours. I grabbed a permanent black marker to add some accents around those stencils, to add some highlights, some little dots, some extra bits, some lines. And I took more of that gold gilding wax, went around the edges of the pumpkin, and added some ribbon on some of the pumpkins just to kind of tie everything in and give this whole vibe some extra life. This rustic wood pumpkin set is going to have 2 very rough around the edges pieces of wood for the main pieces, and then some leftover paint stick bits. I just cut them down to size, so this way we had 1 long one and then 3 short ones, so this way we could have 2 different pumpkins going in 2 different ways with 2 different wood designs. For the attachment, I'm going to be using some of Type Bond's Quick and Thick Wood Glue and some hot glue. I put just a little bit of both on the paint sticks and then attached them onto the larger pieces of wood and allowed them to dry for about 20 minutes. On a side note, the funny thing about filming your projects is when you're doing it like this, it's not always easy to see if you're perfectly centering. So if you'll ever notice, like, you're watching someone make something and they're taking a minute and then it gets cut, that's because we realized it was completely off center. And since I happened to realize just how off-centered mine was, to compensate, I left a little gap, okay, to make it look purposeful, but it wasn't. I'm gonna use 2 different paint colors for this, and I'm gonna be messy. I am not going to try to have full coverage. I'm just kind of slapping this on here. I want some of that wood to pop through. I want these to be rustic, and that's just how I'm rolling with this idea. Feel free to remix this into what works best for you. For the stems, I'm just going to use these and a little bit of wood glue to attach them. And I want to add some even more rustic accents. So I grabbed some scrapbook paper and I just started cutting these out. Not sure where I got these. I want to say Temu, but it could have also been from Amazon. Just cut out a couple little sections in the shape of leaves and then glued them onto the top of the pumpkins. Once they were attached, I grabbed some of my fabric strips that I had and started attaching them in different sections. Now, I am horrible at trying to make solid bows, so a trick that I do is I try to find either the same color or similar colors and do it in sections. I'll do the bottom part of the bow, and then I will create the top loops and tie them off with some twine and then cut them so they fit right on top of our little ribbon legs we've already attached. And there is our beautiful bow all glued down, and I feel so much more fuzzier inside than if I would have tried to create a bow and attach it on here all in one piece. I am a sucker for a good rustic piece, and I love me some plate decor. So this little rustic rooster DIY, here we come. But only we're going to be using this adorable baby Highland cow that's in a bucket with some pumpkins. How cute is this napkin? And guess what? You get 4 designs on this. We're going to take a paintbrush with a little bit of water, and we're going to use that to trim along the design as exact as we possibly can to be able to put on our plate. Plus, it's a good way to kind of tear and fray the edges and get a pretty perfect and detailed trim. When I was happy with that, I then removed the sneaky layers that are on the back. So we just had the top decorative layer so we can decoupage onto our plate. This is a Dollar Tree charger, and I'm just putting a nice coat of white for a base behind the napkin. For the medium, I'm gonna use some of DIY's liquid patina. I get this from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs. For anyone that's interested, I keep a link down in the description box. Before I start to decoupage this, I'm going to trim it up just a little bit more to match the shape of the inside of this plate. And this is a complete preference. You can leave as much of the napkin on there as you would like. When you're completely happy with how you need to trim down your piece, it's a good idea to kind of size up exactly where you want it. Use one of your hands to hold it in place, fold it over, put a little bit of your medium there, and then press it down exactly where you want it. So this way you don't have it moving and possibly putting it on crooked. Another little tip, whenever you're decoupaging, grab yourself a kitchen sponge. I picked these up in a pack from Walmart. I love using them to be able to just press directly down on top of the napkin. It kind of soaks up any of that extra medium through the pores of the napkin, helping to reduce any wrinkles. Now that your piece is in place, you just continue to do the same thing until the entire napkin is attached. I like to say less is more, especially with the medium. It helps to reduce wrinkles, but you do you and what works best for you. This is just what works best for me. I let this dry for a few hours, and now we're going to kind of turn this, what looks like wood, into a deeper wood by adding some antique Waverly wax. Just taking a little bit on my finger and kind of smearing it around the napkin. This is going to cover up that white that we painted on there, so it's not so, you know, creating that separation, and it's going to blend the napkin into the plates. It's also going to give us that wood plate appearance. Now, I did spend about 30 minutes using a baby wipe, a paper towel, and my finger blending everything together and going over the plate to get that deep wood look that our piece from Pinterest had. When I was happy enough with the wood color we had, I took a little bit of cream paint and I went over the napkin around the edges and onto the dark antique wax we had around the napkin, just to kind of blend everything in a little bit more, showing through with some of those wood grains in this plate. To create a little pocket on the front, I just cut up some burlap and frayed it around the edges, and I used some tacky glue and hot glue to attach it down. At the top of the plate, I made a little messy bow with some scrap pieces of fabric that were sent to me some time ago by a subscriber, and I just kind of layered them on top of one another and absolutely adore how this beautiful rustic plate turned out. For this fall decoupage project, we're going to be using this beautiful A4 size rice paper to make some coasters using some towels that I picked up from Home Depot, in case anyone is wondering. And we're going to be doing the iron-on method for these. I'm using dishwasher safe Mod Podge and applying a nice thick layer to the top of both of these tiles. While they're drying, I'm just going to cut down the sections that we want for our coasters. You can absolutely do this however you would like. I'm just going to take some scissors, and we can always sand off the excess. Since our designs are a little smooshed in here with this paper, I feel like just cutting them down with scissors is just going to give me a better trim. Now it's time to bring on in the iron. I'm not used to saying that without like doing a voiceover. We're going to also need some parchment paper. I am asked often, like, what's the difference between wax paper or parchment paper? Parchment paper is for heat, right? Parchment paper is for heat, and wax paper is to help prevent sticking. While the parchment paper also helps with that, it can prevent a number of things. It can help prevent your iron sticking to the Mod Podge, sticking to the design. It can help the design from bleeding. I've had on decoupage paper, I've had rice paper, I've had napkins, oh my goodness, especially napkins, burn, or the ink will attach to the iron. So there's just a bunch of reasons that you want to remember to have some parchment paper. And whenever I am doing coasters, I really like using the iron-on method because it gives us the best finish. Place our parchment paper right over our piece, holding it in place so it doesn't move. And then I personally like to take the, I don't even have it on. Yep, you guys are watching me for tutorial directions. I literally want you to know that while that's heating up, I'm just sitting here with my hand holding the parchment paper in place. This is why I tell y'all, like, learn from my mistakes. If you come to the DIY struggle for anything, just don't do what I do. I say that, but you know what I mean. Learn from the struggles, okay? Other than that, I got pretty good tips, missus. I like to take the iron and start at one end and work my way through. I have, on occasions, started from one side and went around the whole thing and noticed that there was a bubble in the center. So I just like to work from one, to the end. And for anyone that is looking for more detailed tutorial information, I do have a how to iron on decoupage method video that I'll have linked down in the bottom. I'm gonna show you a little tip. I'm doing this without the parchment paper. You do this with the parchment paper, but I wanna show you the point, okay? So when you put your Mod Podge on here and you'll see like we get to the ends, it's not completely sealed. You wanna make sure that you do have that seal before you go sanding off any excess. You want it as sealed as far over as it can be. So I like to take the iron, and again, I will do this with the parchment paper, and I will just kind of take the iron and go down, and it just guarantees that it seals that curvature where you have the Mod Podge. So whatever excess you are actually sanding off, it's not attached to your piece. And you can do this method with anything that is curved. On a side note, I've had someone ask me how long have I been using this piece of parchment paper because they use theirs over and over. A while. This piece of parchment paper has created many things. So it's probably one of the few things that I can say it gets reused over and over and over again. To finish off our coasters, I'm just going to pop these on the back here. I've used, what are they called? Cork pieces I get from Dollar Tree. I've absolutely used those. And if you're worried about these like popping off, take some tacky glue with a paintbrush and kind of put some extra around here. It will just ensure that this is going to stick on here well. You might need to do that once or twice. You could even put a little bit underneath of the adhesive here just to ensure that it's going to really stick on to the bottom of your coaster. And now let's seal over it. Dollar Tree's Plus section, they have these gorgeous large decorative cutting boards for just $3, which is going to be perfect to create this stunning high-end stencil fall decor piece. But to start off, we're gonna need to paint over this beautiful design, so say bye to it. Okay, that's enough of that. Now grab you some white paint. I'm using DIYS paint to put a nice base on here. You can use whatever paint you would like. Just put a nice base color on your board. We're gonna create a blended accent background, so we're gonna need some accent colors. Since it's fall, I'm using these. If you really want your colors to blend, grab a little spray bottle and give a little spritzy spritz on your surface, and then take your paint color and just put a minus the little gross spot that just pulled. Ew. You just need a little smoosh on here, and then take a small paintbrush and blend it right where you put that water, and just go back and forth until you notice there's no end line where the paint stops and where the paint starts. Do the same thing in another spot on the board so there's a little bit of evenness with the dispersion of your paint colors. Spray it again if you feel like you need to move the colors around more, and apply the same technique using as many different colors as you want, keeping your main color in the background very dominant. Just lightly blend them out. You can see up close here how the water is actually moving along the board, helping to give you a really nice dispersion of that color so it's not real dark in just one section. I rotated the paint colors and kept using the spritzer to add more water as I needed to move the colors around. Use as many different colors as you would like, but keep in mind if you're going to use a different colored stencil on the front, too many background colors in your accent portion might look a little funny. You can let this dry like this if you would like. I'm going to take a napkin and just wipe back some of this excess paint. To tie in all the colors, just to make it look a little bit more cohesive, you can take some more of the paint you put in the background and put it on a brush and go over the top, dry brushing some of that color so we have pops of the deeper colors and the different tones coming through the white paint. And people, it should go without saying to make sure this is dry before you begin to stencil. For the stencil portion, we're going to use two different two different styles of stenciling, and we're gonna start with this one first. I used some painter's tape to attach this down to our board, and the sections I don't want stenciled, I just covered over them with more painter's tape. A little tip I want to share if you struggle with bleed through on your stencils is to take a little bit of Mod Podge and put a light layer over top of the stencil. This is going to seal in the stencil in little cracks that might be popped up, and once it's dry, you'll be able to take your paint color and stencil over the Mod Podge that's been dry, and it will help stop that bleed through. Another way to help reduce bleed through is if you have the same color in the background, you can just take that same color paint over the stencil. But since Mod Podge is clear and we have a multicolor background, this is going to be clear as it dries, allowing the color to pop through in the back along with the stencil color we're going to be painting over top of this with minimal bleed through. Another little tip, if you notice pieces of your stencil that are in the center of the stencil are popping up like this, you can hold it down with your finger, put the Mod Podge on here, and then hit it with the heat gun real quick so it dries it fast and it'll be down in place. And people, keep in mind, if you're doing this, not to keep your finger in front of the heat gun, it gets a little hot. And as you can see here, once it's all dry, our stencil is nicely attached without any gaps. For the color for this portion, I'm just gonna use some black. For this first stencil, I personally want it to be a little bit rustic. So you can skip this next step if you want to, but this is too dark for me. So I'm gonna knock it down a little bit by giving it a light sand. I then grabbed the second stencil and attached it with a little bit of painter's tape. There was some overhang at the bottom, so I couldn't put any down there. For the bottom portion of our stencil, I'm gonna take a little bit of my homemade texture paste and put in different sections of our bowl and add different colors to it. Two different color greens and an orange and a red. Be mindful when you're adding paints how much paint, because too much paint will actually mess up the texture paste. So little at a time, mix and then see if you need more depending on how deep you want your color. You can absolutely use whatever you want to spread out your texture paste. This is going to give us a raised stencil on top of here. I happen to have these little putty knife things in my stash. I use them, but absolutely, if you don't have fancy schmancy tools, they're not necessary for this. When you're all done, peel that stencil off the top. You are welcome to seal over this. I recommend letting it cure for at least 24 hours. Add whatever accents you would like onto the top, and you can even come back in with a little bit of paint and highlight your raised stencil if you want, adding some extra depth onto this. I love how bright this turned out. I don't usually do bright pieces, and this is just perfect. I'm going to show you how you can take several different items and take moss along with the little pine cones and the acorns and the fruit pieces and just create little centerpieces or spots that you can add little fall touches into your home. For this one, we're just using one of Dollar Tree's round wire baskets, and I have one of Walmart's live edge wood round pieces that are like $5 sitting underneath of the piece. And then I'm just going to take the moss and spread it out, and people, it's just as messy as any other moss, just in case anyone was wondering. There are several ways you could go about giving your basket a little oomph. I grabbed some burlap and just kind of layered it in the center here, so this way my bits, when I put them in the basket, they weren't all the same height, and it didn't require me using a whole bunch of the pine cones, the acorns, or the pear pieces to get the appearance. If I had some little apples, I would have absolutely added that in here too. I did decide to pop in one of my little small decorative pumpkins just for some different color in the basket, and I love how rustic this piece is. I picked up this little wood piece a couple months ago at Ross, and I figured if I wasn't going to use it for my home decor, I could absolutely use it for my staging. It's very much my style, and it was only a couple bucks. If you don't have a Ross Dress for Less near you, there are other retail stores like TJ Maxx or Home Goods that also carry pieces like this that are really inexpensive, and you never know what they'll come in handy for. So I took some of this messy moss, some of those pine cones, added some of these little LED lights from Dollar Tree, and then grabbed some of those acorns and popped in the center for a little bit of color. And I love how this piece turned out. And here's another one of those bowls that are just in a different shape. So I grabbed some more of that messy moss and another LED candle, but this one was a little bit larger, and I had some of Dollar Tree's metal ribbon wrapped around here, popped in some of those little pine cones for that extra fall accents. And how about this one? These Dollar Tree wire baskets are the perfect size for their wood pallets. They add a little bit of stability onto the bottom of the baskets for you to be able to put things in here, like this vintage candle pillar that I found at Goodwill a couple weeks ago. I added some of those fall bits in our mystery box and then covered it up with some of the messy moss, making it a little moody. And that's going to be it for these ideas. You will have to let me know in the comments below which one of these were your favorite. I've been a fan of these tabletop hoop pieces for some time. They got the boho vibe going on, and Dollar Tree always has this 2-pack. Forget the fact that like one is missing. Okay, they have a 2-pack of these, usually at the store. We're going to use the large one in the pack for this project. Grab a base. Dollar Tree has a bunch of different options for you to choose from, and the wood pieces are actually pretty nice. Then it's time to bring on in your stapler. For a little bit of added stability, I decided to pop some wood glue in there and then attach both pieces. I went with a round base. I popped 3 staples in this joint and allowed it to dry before grabbing our floral bits. Now I had some pieces from Hobby Lobby that I recently picked up for $1.49 and 99 cents, along with some Dollar Tree pieces. And I just kind of attached them with some hot glue, holding them into place. And then once that dried, I smushed some tacky glue in there for a long lasting hold. You could absolutely paint your hoop and base whatever color you would like, but I think for the fall season, this neutral was perfect. For this fall decor sign, we're going to need one of Dollar Tree's large square blanks. I'm removing the tag because I don't plan on hanging mine. You can keep it if you want, and then pick a color. I'm going to use this. I've been really in love with this kind of color for a couple months now, and I'm just using a little bit of this with a baby wipe to get a nice coat on this entire blank. You're going to be able to see the wood grain through this a little bit, which is exactly what I want. If you want solid coverage, make sure you paint it without any water. When it's dry, grab yourself a stencil. Any stencil. I just wanted to use this one. I really like this piece. And then tape it down. I'm going to use some of my homemade texture paste. You guys could absolutely just paint yours, or I also keep a link down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box. Just click the more button. I usually use Tim Holtz brand pretty often. That's pretty great as well if you don't want to make your own. While that was drying, I wanted to make a big, gorgeous, giant bow, okay? But me knowing me is really aware that I can't. So I grabbed some of this Dollar Tree fabric that I had that has a beautiful color on it and started snipping it in bits, because I might not be able to make a big, giant, gorgeous bow, but I sure can layer me some bits and make me a nice, messy bow. I didn't show it here, but I want to let y'all know that I'm using tacky glue for this and a paintbrush, and you'll see that I am like painting it on the fabric plus the wood, and I'm doing this for each strip. I've been doing this long enough to know that hot glue is just not going to cut it, especially if I wanted to put this on a door or put it in a window, or if I'm going to sell it and they want to hang it or put it somewhere where sun's going to get to it. Those bits are just going to fall apart. So tacky glue is just going to make me feel fuzzy inside, and while it is messy and it is a pain when you're doing projects like this, I also know that it is going to withstand whatever it's going to be placed in. Absolutely love how stunning this piece turned out, and it was really fun and simple to do. If you enjoyed these fall DIYs, check out this video right here for more inspiration. As always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me, and until next time.